In general, when we describe someone as devoted, we tend to mean that in a positive way. If you say someone's a devoted father or husband or wife or teacher or athlete, what we mean is they bring passion and energy and resources, that they are committed and all into that thing. So in general, yes, being devoted is a good thing, but I would argue that being devoted is only a good thing if you're devoted to the right things. For instance, there's a man ironically named Bruce Wayne, not actually Batman, but he decided he wanted to have the record for eating Chipotle the most consecutive days in a row. So for 500 days, this guy decides he's going to Chipotle every day. And you think about that. I don't think you can eat at Chipotle for $10 anymore, but we'll just, for ease of math's sake, say it was $10 a meal. The dude spent $5,000 over a year and a half to eat at Chipotle. And for what? He got a certificate on the wall. Like, you broke a record that really no one cares about. But he was devoted to it, time, energy, resources. Or you can consider a man named Kelvin. He's from Michigan. And he decided he was going to devote time, energy, and resources to a much more worthwhile cause. He wanted to collect the greatest number of Shrek VHS tapes. I don't know why. It's not a cinematic masterpiece. It's not like they're going to be worth something, but this dude spent time, energy, resources amassing this large collection of Shrek on VHS. And I look at that and I go, well, sure, he's devoted, but to what? You know, there's no fruit from that. There's no long-term gain from collecting something like Shrek VHS tapes. And so what I would suggest to us this morning is that we need to be devoted to the right things with the right attitude. And sometimes we're devoted to the wrong things. We spend time, energy, and resources pouring our lives into things that maybe don't have what I would suggest is important as long-lasting gospel kingdom fruit. Or we're devoted to the right thing with the wrong attitude. And so we're about the work of the gospel, but we're kind of cynical and sarcastic about it. And we're not really sure that the Holy Spirit can actually make a difference. We want to be devoted to it, but we're kind of cynical. So both of those things in tension, I believe, are important. We have to be devoted to the right things, but also have the right attitude and disposition about the things that we're devoted to. So last week, Pastor Ben brought us into Acts chapter 2. And in Acts chapter 2, it's the birth of the church. Acts chapter 1, we find out literally there are 120 people who believe in Jesus in all the world. They're gathered in Jerusalem, and Peter begins to preach this message, and the Holy Spirit moves in and through this preaching, and what we find out is what happens in Acts chapter 2, verse 41. Let's pick up there. Those who accepted his message, that's Peter's preaching, those who accepted his message were baptized, and about 3,000 were added to their number that day. Overnight, the church goes from 120 believers to over 3,000 believers because of the work of what the Holy Spirit is doing through God's grace. And so my question is, when you go from 120 believers to 3,000 overnight, what do you invite those people into? How do you help them respond to the gospel that they've just given their lives to? How do you help them follow Jesus? And what happens next, I think, is absolutely crucial. Verse 42. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes, and they ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. And what struck me is right after these 3,000 believers believed and were baptized, notice right away, verse 42, it says they devoted themselves. That is to say, they stepped into their faith commitment wholeheartedly. To be devoted is to have passion and priorities and persistence. So when we say someone's devoted to something, what we mean is they're passionate about it. And by passionate, I don't just mean they're emotional about it. Passion is about aligning resources with the place where I feel a burden. I'm going to give time, energy. I'm going to be devoted to this thing. About passion, priorities. This thing is first and foremost over a lot of other things that are of lesser value and of lesser importance. This has priority in my life. And it's about persistence. I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to be persuaded. I'm going to give my life to this thing. The word that's translated here as devoted can also mean to be stubbornly obstinate. If you have little kids, you've probably encountered what it is to be stubbornly obstinate. My family has a problem. It's called Zesto. We love ice cream. And when my kids hear ice cream and I tell them no, they are persistent and stubbornly obstinate. They will ask me until I lose my sanity and cave, and I'm like, fine, we'll get ice cream, right? But they won't give up. They're not dissuaded. They have a single-minded conviction, let's get dad to buy ice cream. And sometimes I look at their example and I go, I need half of that devotion to my pursuit of Jesus Christ, right? But when I think about devotion, it is passion and priorities and persistence. It is, in Acts chapter 1, verse 14, it says the apostles were together in the upper room and they joined together constantly. That word constantly in Acts 1 is the same word here translated as devoted. It is something they consistently gave themselves to. So I read this and I go, okay, if that's what devotion is, then we need to pay really careful attention to what the early church was devoted to, because I would argue that for us, this is what we should be devoted to. Now, I hope in my opening intro, right, you hear the phrase, this guy's collecting Shrek tapes on VHS, and you go, well, that's ridiculous. Right? We can see, okay, that's not a pursuit worth pouring time and energy to. Church, here's my concern, is that sometimes in the church, we get caught up in the equivalent of collecting Shrek tapes on VHS. We get concerned and upset about all sorts of things that are not gospel priority. So paying attention to what the church was devoted to is highly, highly important for us. This tells us what to prioritize and where to put energy. I would suggest to you that in Acts chapter 2, the church was devoted to 3 core things. Walk through this with me. Number 1, the church in Acts was devoted to the gospel truth of Jesus. Acts 2:42. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. Now, they didn't have the New Testament, right? They couldn't hold the Bible. They couldn't pull out their phone and go to Bible Gateway and pull up 9,000 translations, right? They didn't have that. So in the early church, when they heard one of the apostles were those who knew Jesus personally. They had witnessed the resurrection. They had authority to preach in the church. These new believers are so passionate about it that when they hear an apostle preaching, they go, I'm there. I want to learn. I want to grow. I want to get more of this gospel truth in my life. And they were devoted to it. They were passionate about it. They prioritized it. They were persistent in it, going, we need to be focused and centered on the gospel truth of Jesus Christ. Church, I would tell you, same. The church must be relentlessly gospel focused. We must be relentlessly focused on the truth of the teaching of Jesus Christ. That is the foundation on which everything else is built. If we don't have that right, nothing else matters. We have to be rooted, passionate, persistent about proclaiming and teaching and inviting others into the gospel truth of Jesus. Secondly, the church was committed to the unity and the community of believers. Acts 2:42-46, listen to this. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who was in need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes, and they ate together with glad and sincere hearts. Did you catch that? They were devoted to the apostles' teaching, to breaking bread, and to the fellowship. And then Luke goes on to describe what that looks like. They gathered in the temple courts to worship corporately. They gathered in their homes to eat together. They sold possessions to take care of one another. It wasn't just that they lived in community, they were a unified community. And we know they were from diverse backgrounds. If you read Acts chapter 2, they come from a wide variety of places. They've traveled to Jerusalem, and they find unity around the cause of Jesus Christ. And the believers were devoted to fellowship because they recognized the need for gathering as a body, where we need the encouragement, the challenge, and the building up of one another. They were devoted to this. How many times in South Dakota do we wake up and we're like, oh, the wind's above 10 miles an hour today. I don't think I can go to church. Right? I mean, if you're waiting for nice weather in South Dakota to go to church, you got like 3 days a year. But they were devoted. They were passionately and persistently prioritizing gathering in a community because they couldn't survive without it. They needed it. It was a necessity. And so many times we see as a luxury what they devoted as a priority and a necessity to grow in their faith with Jesus. And the third thing that they're devoted to, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to the breaking of bread, to the fellowship, and to prayer. Sometimes I feel like you could take 98% of the sermons I've ever written, and they probably boil down to something you learned in like first grade Sunday school. It really is that simple. They devoted themselves to Jesus, to meeting together, and to prayer. But again, prayer wasn't just a nice add-on. If I have time, I'll pray. No, it says that they were devoted to this. Acts 1:14, they gathered together constantly in prayer. This was a consistent rhythm and practice of how they gathered as a community. Prayer and the gospel were at the heart of their community. It was around those things which they were unified. I don't know if I could describe my own prayer. Am I devoted to prayer? Am I passionate about it? Am I prioritizing it? Am I persistent in it? But what really strikes me too is not just what they were devoted to. I would suggest to you they were devoted to the right things, but they were also devoted to these things with the right attitude. And when I look at the attitude of the believers, number one, they had glad hearts. Acts 2:46. Every day, they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts. There was a sense of joy that pervaded the Christian community. They weren't known for their anger. They weren't known for their cynicism. They weren't known for the things that they disagreed about. They were known for having glad hearts that overflowed with joy. But secondly, it wasn't just glad hearts. It says that they had glad and two, sincere hearts. Right? They weren't just swept up in an emotional moment. They were sincere in their conviction, and you knew they were sincere in their conviction because the way that they devoted their lives to the apostles' teaching, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer, they were devoted to this. And so they were overflowing with joy, and they were sincere and single-minded in their conviction to be about the things of Jesus. And number three, they responded consistently by praising God. Look at verse 47. It says they had glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. They had glad hearts, sincere and single-minded in their conviction. They responded consistently by praising God. So let me paint this picture for you. In Jerusalem, there's this new movement of people who claim to follow Jesus. And the rest of Jerusalem is going, what is the deal with these Christians? There was 120 of them. Now there's over 3,000 that claim to follow. What is going on? And they looked at them, and they saw what they were devoted to. The teachings of Jesus. They were devoted to gathering in unity and community. They were devoted to praying, and they were this community that as they gathered, they overflowed with gladness. They were sincere in their convictions. They were stubborn in their praise of the Jesus that they follow. And notice what happens. The result is that the church had greater impact. Verse 47. It says, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. Because of what they were devoted to and how they were devoted to it, God gave them favor and influence in the community of Jerusalem. And notice what it says, and the Lord added to the number daily those who were being saved. Do you notice who's doing the work? The Lord added. It wasn't that their kids' ministry was that great. It wasn't that Peter was that great of a preacher. It wasn't that they had a great marketing strategy. There's a genuine movement of God built on the prayer and the dedication of the people of God, overflowing with joy and gladness that allows the Holy Spirit to bless them with favor and spiritual impact in the communities they're a part of. So church, what I would suggest to you today is it's vitally important for us to be devoted to the right things with the right attitude.